So I thought we'd kick off by a quick browse at the back panel of the controller for the MK3, because we actually have an audio interface built into this. I'm not actually going to use for these videos because I'm using my microphone and that's got an XLR, so I'm using that plugged into the mixer. But you could just put your two speakers, plug these into the line out here, and you wouldn't need anything else. You have some monitors, plug them in there, and the audio interface is going to channel out there, and then you have the line out volume here. So that's really cool. So you don't actually need if you're just purchase this, you don't actually need a separate audio interface because you've got one built into the hardware. And we also have this microphone input. So it's a jack input. My microphone's XLR, which is why I couldn't use it for these videos, but you have your mic input and your mic gain, some line ins as well. So if you have another piece of hardware, a synthesizer or something, you could actually just plug that straight into the line inputs. We're going to look at recording using a Machinist sampler in one of the later videos. So you can just record audio in there. We've got the headphone socket here and the headphone volume. We've got MIDI in, MIDI out, sustain and expression pedal, the USB, and the power button over here, powers on and off, and this power supply which boosts the light on the, you might not be able to see it too well, you might notice the light's dim there when I unplugged it, so it increases the light, which is useful if you're using in a dark basement, sweaty club or something, and you want some increased light on the RGB color displays. So loads of really useful stuff on the back panel of the hardware controller. Now let's jump into, I'll point out is actually as well, if we shift over to the software quickly, for your preferences, to make sure in your general hardware preferences, so the audio preferences here, we jump here. So if you wanted to use the Maschine MK3 as your audio interface, you select it here. I've got the Apogee Duet USB selected because that's the one I'm going to be using. That's my audio interface. But you can select the interface there, or you could use the built-in Mac audio interface as well. You can set your sample rate and buffer size in here. So, if the CPU is struggling a little bit, just increase the buffer size. And but if you're recording, you don't want any latency, so drop that buffer size right down. So a couple of settings there, and now let's jump over back to the hardware and look at some of the basic transport controls and pad mode functions. So we'll now take a look at some of the more basic functions but very important functions of the controller. And we'll start with these three buttons to the right and this encoder here. So I've got a little pattern loaded up. We're going to get into browsing and loading in the next video. I can initiate playback here. And for starters, we have this volume control. And you can see it's lit at the moment. So with that lit, and we notice when I pull this down, we can see the master volume there. So I can control master volume with this highlighted. Click it again, and we're no longer controlling the master volume with the four-way encoder. We can also control swing. So click on the swing button now, and now this encoder is no longer going to be controlling the volume, it will now control the swing. And we can see master swing has appeared up there now. We can hear our beats are much more swung. So it's moving hits. It's usually the 16th notes or the syncopated hits, not the ones on the beat. Not the ones on the beat or on the offbeat, but the syncopated ones. It's moved them and it creates a nice funky sort of swung groove. So there's swing. Click it again, no longer controlling swing. And also the tempo button. Actually, you could just turn down the swing. And then tempo. At the moment we're 120 BPM. Can speed it up. slow it down, press it again, no longer controlling tempo. And then we have some transport controls down here. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these because some of these get linked into other videos, but we essentially have our play and stop. And if we want to restart from the start of our pattern, you notice the playhead stops wherever you hit play for the second time or hit stop, it just stops there. If you want to restart from the start of the loop, hit the restart button. And so we also have a few other things down here, the record button. So we're going to get into recording some patterns using this. We have our arrays, also doubles up as a replace, and loads of stuff is double function on this controller, and where it has the capital letters and the smaller case underneath, the shift button will activate the double function in all these cases, as we'll discover as we move through the videos. Tap tempo, metronome, and follow and grid buttons, and also this loop. Essentially we'll be using these very often: the stop, play, restart and record. And with some sounds loaded in here, what's quite nice is the pad mode over here, and we've got a video dedicated to the pad mode and all the stuff we can do in here. But if you click on the pad mode, you notice I was in events previously, I clicked onto the pad mode and it just brings up my group and my sounds, and I can see I've got a kick drum, snare, hi-hat, open hi-hat, and I can just trigger them. Or any one of the 16 sounds within my group, just instantly just dropping into pad mode there, and we can start triggering stuff on the pads. And also come over here to this file button, click on this, and this is a really handy way of being able to save and load projects directly from the controller. So what I could do here is going onto the file button, I could go to new, and I could load a brand new project, discard the current one, don't want to save that, and it just loads an empty project ready for me to start adding sounds to. Or I could save it as, and then I would have to switch to the software and have to type in what I'm wanting to save it as, and also navigate to where I want to save that project. I can hit cancel. Save copy just very quickly duplicates the project. So we're working on this and we think this project, we think we want to make some changes. Before we make all those changes, we could just quickly go save copy, and that just very quickly just creates that backup. And then we can make some changes and think we don't like what we've done there, but we've saved over it now. We could quickly revert to that saved copy. So that's a pretty handy little function. And then we have our recent projects in here, so we could load one of these. You notice I kept saying, I pressed save copy a few times and it's just duplicated this new project. So we can browse and load sounds in there.